You are listening to the Wild Rockies Podcast, Perceptions on Place, a production of the Wild Rockies Field Institute, or WRFI for short. My name is Matt Herbert, marketing coordinator for WRFI and producer of this podcast. In this episode, longtime WRFI instructor Dave Morris travels to the plains around Billings, Montana, where he talks to Steve Charter, a regenerative rancher, proud Montanan, and advocate for his community with the Northern Plains Resource Council. Thank you so much for listening, and please enjoy.
Right. I am on the road. I've just been driving from Billings, Montana, up to Steve Charter's ranch, which is just north of town, about 20 miles. And we've been coming up to Steve Charter's place on the cycling course for almost 20 years. And I think this is the first time I have driven up here for this meeting. We're out in the plains, winds blowing across plains. It's kind of a stormy day. It rained a lot last night. Students and I were all in our tents, got about half-inch of rain. Prairies up here are looking pretty good for this time of year. They're green, and I bet Steve is going to be pretty happy about that. Steve has been ranching up here for his whole life, and the lives of his parents and grandparents have also been spent here. And it's an amazing story of his family, all the work they've done over generations, not just on their place, but also for regional, local conservation. They've helped start a number of organizations. They've just been real leaders throughout their really storied history. Steve is now running this ranch mostly on his own into his later years, and there's a lot of history here that we'll get into when we meet up with them. Getting closer now, driving past their vermiculture project here, where they cultivate earthworms, and they are great for soil fertility. They make a kind of worm tea from the castings of the worms and use that on their own land up here, Steve does. And they also sell it out to other ranchers in the area. I see up ahead an old tank that they used to use for their biodiesel project. And there's just evidence of lots of innovative work that Steve and his family have done over many years to make a living on this place, to keep it alive and vibrant and sustainable in the face of many, many challenges. So, all right. So I'm in Steve Charter's living room in his beautiful house built into the side of a hill about 20 miles north of Billings.
Yeah, it's about right. Yeah.
It's kind of it's cloudy day after a little bit of a rainstorm, and our students on the cycling course are cycling this way. Don't know exactly when they get here. We might get a little bit of them on tape if they do. But otherwise, we're just going to have a talk about life up here and some of the history that's happened and some of the outlook based on like a really long multi-generational experience in this place that you, Steve, have had and your family has had since what year was it?
So my folks moved up from Wyoming in 1950.
Okay.
And that was a different ranch than this, just to the east of here, that we called the home place. And it was very remote and just, not much of a road, not a very improved road, and no phone and no electricity. And so that was one of the reasons they got the land so cheap, that it was very remote, and they figured it wouldn't be attractive to a family, but my family, I guess it was attractive to. And then my two brothers and sisters were young kids in, and then I was born I guess less than a year later after they moved up here. And and they didn't plan to have a little baby out in the this remote setting on this ranch, but that's the way it is.
Were you born on the place, or?
Well, it was an interesting story. My mom had because people, not to worry, she kept saying, well, he's due around Christmas. And then she started kind of believing it herself. But she went into town to do the Christmas shopping and grocery shopping. And she felt she was going into labor. And of course, no phone to tell the rest of the family. And
wow.
But she knew that there was a neighbor that was at the cattle sale. And so she called the stockyards and paged him and said she was going to the hospital. So she got that's how got the word out anyways. And so that all worked out pretty good. So I was born in the hospital in Billings there.
And then you grew up on that ranch?
Yeah, we were on that ranch. But there was a country school, and it was earlier. There was more students. I suppose at the peak there was maybe 10. And then by the time I went there, it was down to my 2 brothers and me and one other girl. So I went there for a couple of years, and then they closed the school down. And our option was to ride a bus like on 40 miles of bad road to Warden. And, they just figured that wasn't really safe. So then we just bought a house in Billings to go to school in. And my dad stayed out at the ranch, and then we'd come out on the weekends and help and stuff.
And how was it different back then? Like, what was the most significant things like back in the 50s?
Yeah. We were way behind times in a way. I mean, like, just because it was remote and there was no power and phone and the rural schools and stuff like that, it was almost like 20, 30 years back in time from everybody else. And then when we moved to town, big culture shock.
Right.
And, we all adjusted pretty quickly, but we were definitely kind of rubes. And I remember one time I walked over somewhere along one of the, like, Grand Avenue, the main street, and I just naturally wore my cowboy hat. I just didn't think anything of it. And, people were yelling out the windows and stuff. And I got home and my brother said, don't be so stupid. You wear your cowboy hat in town. And, okay. I didn't realize that, but yeah. So you kind of learn to fit in,
Yeah. I was just in downtown Billings today and saw some people outside a hat shop wearing big cowboy hats.
Of course, now, then, it wasn't fashionable to wear a cowboy hat. It kind of would mark you as a hick,
How was it just as like an economy and sort of culture of ranching out in this area back then? It was a lot different than now.
It was quite a bit different. And I guess the biggest difference is land prices. So when my folks moved to Montana, they got a down payment together, and my mother's father kind of helped them out to get a down payment on this, big ranch, but it was really cheap. It was like $3 an acre.
Right.
And at that time, you could make the land payments with the profits from the cattle. And so my dad did that, and then he just kept buying more ranches because, he could get the money, and he put together, like a huge ranch. Like, I think it was 73,000 acres at one point. It was never paid for, and then of course some of it's leased and stuff like that. But he could do that on, the economics were where you could do that. and that's not even, not even in the ballpark now. There's a ranch just north of here just sold for $1,700 an acre. Well,
Wow.
you couldn't probably pay $100 an acre and make cattle work on it.
Wow.
So what that means is that nobody, unless you're a multimillionaire, billionaire, can afford to buy ranches. And then that kind of also means the ranches that are, say, in a family. Well, like say if there's more than one kid, say if one person wants to ranch, well, then they got to buy everybody else out, and that's impossible.
How are they going to do that? Right.
So it's just, the economics of it are not where, ordinary family ranches, that they just aren't going to be able to be sustained. And,
right.
We've just been able to lease some of the land from a ranch that sold for hunting. So that's, kind of the future as well. Can you, lease land or kind of figure out other enterprises and like with our ranch here, like I'm the only kind of full-time employee, and my daughter and son both live on the ranch, but they have other jobs, and that's pretty common, or a lot of times a husband and wife, at least one of them will work in town. Sometimes they both work in town and
right.
do the ranch work after hours or something. So it's the economics have really changed.
Mm-hmm. So back then, like in the 50s, 60s, were they selling to like local feedlots or slaughterhouses, or?
So that part of the industry has totally changed too. Is there was two packing plants in Billings and others in the state, and they weren't huge, but they were, they weren't small either by standards then. And there was a local market. I mean, sometimes a lot of the calves would maybe go to the Midwest too, but it was a really diverse. There was lots of ranchers, quite a few packing plants, and then quite a few stores. There was, I remember in Billings there was, lots of corner stores, and there were some of the bigger chains, it's really changed where there's still quite a few ranchers, but a lot less, a lot less percentage, and the ranches are bigger.
Right.
And then the packing plants, it's just like three big companies that own, plants that kill, like 6,000 head a day or something like that,
right.
Massive scales. And they're all far away, they're in Colorado,
Yeah.
And so that concentration of market is made, there's really, the competition is not there like it was.
Right.
So in that sense, the economics of it has also really changed.
Yeah. So it used to be if you were going to a market in Billings and you bought beef, it was probably not from too far away.
Yeah. And now, like, the beef in the supermarket, unless it's a local product, and advertised that way, pretty much any meat you buy in the store is going to be from probably the Midwest or Colorado or somewhere.
California.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. I know that your family and some other ranchers around here have tried to do more direct to consumer local marketing. What have you had to do to make that happen, and how's that going now?
Well, it's a real challenge, and actually my daughter here just in the last year has kind of suspended our direct marketing. It's just a lot to take on as an individual business, and it's not easy to put there. There's some local small slaughter places, but it's hard for them to compete. A place that kills maybe 10 a day, which is, that's not nothing. But to compete with somebody that kills 6,000 a day, and then you get really no value for the hide and all these different things, where the big places, they can consolidate all that and basically sell all that animal, where it makes it really hard for a local packer to do that, and then just to have a consistent supply. And there are some kind of local producers that are kind of banding together and really working at trying to get specialty markets for like the hides and things like that. So there are some really interesting things going on, but it's an uphill battle, and
Right.
The ranching and raising cattle is kind of one business, but then taking that on and slaughtering and marketing, it's hard to be good at all those things. And like my daughter was actually pretty good at the marketing, and very, very good. But me is like, I'm competent at what I do, but I'm not a competent meat salesman or, knowing the different cuts or judging when a cow's ready to be slaughtered. I mean, all those things are very skilled things, and it's pretty hard to be good at all those things.
I know you've been part of and a leader in the recent ideas of regenerative ranching. And I know that before that, every time I've come, there's some interesting project going on.
Some new wrinkle.
And it's always, that's part of what is so interesting about coming to meet with you. I wonder about like the ranching practices back then compared to what you do now, and just the direction of change that you've seen and that has sort of made sense to you over this time.
Yeah. So, there has been a lot of changes and still going on. And I guess personally, I'm still trying to figure out how to ranch in Montana. And, I don't think we've quite figured it out yet, but, it's always, there's always interesting. But the way I kind of think about it is, the way this grassland evolved was with, big herds, and they moved around, and buffalo, but also like there were huge herds of elk and antelope and all those things. And there was the native people that, we don't think of them as managing land, but they were land managers, and they understood all this stuff and had a pretty well a system that worked, but it was for very few people on a very big scale.
Right.
And then, with no appreciation, we just destroyed all that, and then kind of came in and tried to replace it with cattle and farming, and this arid land was a challenge on all that, and it was probably never really suited for anything that we've tried to do with it. And like in my dad's day, land was cheap, and you could run just a few cattle over a very big area, and that kind of worked, but it wasn't anything like the dynamic system that was there with the buffalo and things. And so we've been trying to recreate what was there before, but it's a hard thing to recreate, hundreds of thousands of buffalo and elk and open movement. And so
predators and
and so we can look at that and try to understand it and try to how do we recreate that and what can we do? But I don't think we'll probably ever be there, but that I think by thinking that way, we have improved. And I think, in there's pretty much a downward spiral on the ecology and the land, and I think, by these regenerative practices, we've kind of slowed that descent and maybe, and we're coming back from the worst of it, but I don't think we're not like back to where it was. And, maybe we will, maybe we won't. And then it all gets back to the economics of it. You have to do all this stuff, and then you have to make a profit by doing it at the same time. And a lot of these practices are expensive. So that's the challenge. But then I think, like a lot of the World Wildlife Fund and Audubon, and they see the Great Plains as one of the most intact grasslands left in the world.
Which is amazing that it's one of the most intact. Because it's definitely been impacted.
Yes, it's definitely impacted. But you look at the Midwest, that grassland is totally gone.
Right.
And here, there's not much that's all native, but a lot of our place is native grass and things, and a lot of the original wildlife is still here.
Mm-hmm.
Birds are still here, and so, but there's no guarantee it's going to stay like that. Every force is like going against it. So a lot of these groups have really realized that keeping people on the land and trying to figure out how to make that work, it is the best chance for keeping keeping some of it. And so there's, like we were talking about, we got this water project that's supported by World Wildlife, and then the government programs have kind of recognize this too, but then the way the government is like that's very unstable. But anyway, we've been able to get funds to kind of help us, do the regeneration and try to keep it where it's can be that grassland that supports wildlife and birds and things like that.
It's amazing how just the dynamics and sort of alliances sort of shift over time.
Yeah.
If you told me that World Wildlife Fund and Sierra Club would be like working with ranchers and like keeping cattle on the land as a restoration strategy, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago.
Yeah. It's crazy, quite a phenomenon. And we've had, like there's the local World Wildlife people like Alexis. I mean, they are pretty savvy, understand ranchers, and kind of know how it works. More like the people from back east. I mean, they know it in theory, but you can tell when they come out here, they're not totally comfortable. And at one meeting, I don't know, there was some kind of policy on that they were supporting plant-based food or eating, and usually that's a code word for not eating meat.
Right.
And I said, you can't really support ranchers and then say don't eat meat. There's and you have to make the distinction between feedlots and grass places, and then it gets kind of complicated. Even like a lot of grass-based ranches that their cows pretty much are eating grass all their lives, but then the calves, when you sell them, they may go to a feedlot. So it's hard to be. Somebody could say, "Well, I'll just eat meat that came off a ranch that's never had grain or whatever. But the system is more complicated than that. And
Yeah.
I think it's something to work towards, and that's what we'd like to work toward. But
Yeah.
so it's never like a real easy choice of
Right.
like, well, this is the most sustainable thing. But I really believe eating animals that come off grass, it is more ecologically justifiable than eating like grain that comes off highly fertilized and processed, herbicided. It is, you're better off eating meat than you are that stuff as far as the general environment goes.
It's always been for me a tension in, at least the way I see the ranching world, that someone like you and your regenerative ranching, well, I mean, really any rancher puts just their heart and soul into raising these cows and calves, and then your only option in most cases is to sell it into the industrial food system.
Yeah.
And this calf that spent its whole life, out on the prairies and in a pretty natural environment, doing things kind of similar to some degree to how buffalo lived, and then they're off into
that
feedlot world. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. To me.
It is. It's a real can't quite think of the word, but and it's a hard system to beat. But I think in the long run, if we're going to have a sustainable food supply, we got to kind of reinvent the whole system
and kind of relocalize it. Yeah. And it's also like, for myself, I really try to avoid eating factory meat. But I'd eat, meat from your cows. Absolutely, I'd love to.
Right.
But it's hard for me to find it or know, when I'm getting it or how to get it exactly. Kind of this whole marketing issue and all that. So
and I think over time, I think it's gonna get better. I mean, and to be able to get that system back, but it's gonna be a struggle, for sure.
Yeah. I wonder how it affects your place and your life here, that you're just like 20 miles from the biggest city in Montana.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was kind of, I've always biked here before. It was kind of a revelation. I just get into the van and I'm like, bam, wow, I'm already here. This is,
and you could look out the window and not see any sign of Billings, which is kind of remarkable. But then every time you come out, there's a few more houses. It's moving this way.
Marijuana dispensaries and
we've had offers from people that want to put up like miles, 10,000 acres of solar panels. And which solar's great, but then on the other hand, do you want to look out the window and see 10,000 acres of solar panels? We're trying to put a conservation easement on this place. And multiple reasons. One is like, if there isn't, the pressures of whatever, would eventually say it's going to be development, or a lot of times instead of houses, people need places for shops, or, and that moves out this way.
And just for listeners who may not understand, the conservation easement is a landowner who has like full land rights to their place, can sell off the development rights to a conservation organization, like land trust.
Right.
And they'll hold that and not exercise those rights to develop it, and they could be kind of customized to different outcomes that the landowner and the easement buyer are looking for,
Right.
whether it's habitat values or
And there's several kinds. Some if on the real desirable things that they want to stop development, you can actually get cash payments. Like some of these big corporations and things will come up with that kind of money. The secondary way is, so I'm selling value. There's value in what this land is worth to develop and what it's worth not to develop. And the way I can get that value is in tax, not paying, being able to not pay the income tax on the value of that. So the way I see it is like, I could get some of that value now and be able to use that to kind of keep the ranch running,
right?
Giving up that future value, but it's worth quite if you can figure out how to do that. Then it makes making this ranch more viable now.
Yeah.
Than just being able to cash in kind of down the road.
Right. It's a traditional way of keeping the ranch going through tough times is to sell off chunks of it.
Right. And that's the other way. And that's also what's happened a lot is a ranch will keep going by selling off some, and, but, that's, you can kind of just chop things up for so long, and then there's there's nothing left. So it is a valuable tool, but just like everything, there's a lot of hoops to go through and kind of various things. But
yeah. So I know your family has been, well, I guess we'll get into the whole story of like Northern Plains and how Northern Plains Resource Council and how that got going, because that feels like a really central piece of your family's history here.
Yeah.
So what was that about? What was the origin of this organization and the kind of movement around it?
Yeah. So the way Northern Plains got started was in the early 70s. And it's kind of ironic, the Clean Air Act was passed, which was like great. That was wonderful progress. But the unintended consequence is that, so one of the big things in the Clean Air Act was sulfur dioxide. And a lot of that sulfur dioxide was coming from Eastern Appalachian coal, which is very high in sulfur.
Right.
And so one of the ways they figured they could reduce that sulfur down was, instead of using that high sulfur Eastern coal, would be to come out west and mostly strip mine Western low sulfur coal. So all of a sudden there was this big boom of, there was a lot of coal in Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, well, mostly North Dakota. Very little of it was being mined. Like, some of it was mined when the railroad went through, and they knew these big coal deposits existed, but there really wasn't a market for it, and it wasn't as high a BTU. It was low in sulfur, but also lower in BTUs. And so all these companies all of a sudden turned here, and then they started showing up, landmen, and the federal government was, through the Bureau of Reclamation, was making these big plans for not only mining the coal and shipping it back east, but also building mine mouth power plants. And so there was a huge North Central Power Study was the Bureau of Reclamation's kind of vision of what this could look like, and it was hundreds of these big coal plants and ways to move the water and power lines and so it was a shock to kind of realize this very suddenly. And so when the landmen came, quite a few people just saw the writing on the wall and just sold out. And then,
so they sold their mineral rights.
Well, they just sold their ranches.
Sold the ranches out.
They didn't really. Most of them didn't have the mineral rights.
Oh, okay.
Or coal rights. So, but then there was a certain segment of them that, didn't. They didn't want to sell. They didn't want to leave, and didn't think they should have to. And so those people started forming small groups, like in the Bull Mountains. We had the Bull Mountain Landowners Association and other little groups like that. And then they started hearing about each other. And then at some point, they decided, well, we'll keep our small groups, but we'll get together and form kind of a statewide organization. And that was the Northern Plains Resource Council.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out as pretty much all ranchers. And so those ranchers went to the traditional ranching groups, and said, we've got this problem with these coal companies kind of push us out, and, we need some representation. And those groups weren't interested. They were more aligned with the coal companies.
Mm. So
that's why we kind of had to form our own group and then create other allies. And so this was, early 70s, around the first Earth Day.
Right.
And there was getting to be a lot more kind of environmental awareness. And so, so we started running into those kind of people, young kids just getting out of college who were environmentally oriented. And so it was a odd coalition of very conservative ranchers and people that had more of an environmental bent. And it made a very effective and strong coalition.
Mm-hmm.
The organization has evolved, and just natural attrition. We've lost a lot of the ranchers just because there's very fewer ranches, and just
right.
But that kind of Northern Plains, instead of being just a very traditional environmental group, has always had a really strong agricultural bent and sympathy for ranchers. And, it was like we were talking about before with world wildlife and stuff, is people who might not have been that sympathetic to ranching when they actually got to know ranchers and worked together. There was just much more understanding and appreciation of each other. As ranchers appreciating people who, cared about just the land and the water for that sake, versus ranchers who care about the land and the water, but on a different basis. But those people kind of working together and understanding each other.
Mm-hmm.
There was appreciation of each other's kind of what they wanted, and that's what's been really unique about Northern Plains, is that it's not an environmental organization that's just one-sided to environment. It was more of a balance, and that culture kind of continues as there's fewer and fewer ranchers, and so that culture's still there, but the numbers just aren't there anymore of actual agriculture people, and we still work on other agriculture, like the working to try to get some kind of justice with the big packers, and one of the big issues of country of origin labeling, where beef is the only thing that isn't labeled by country, and even to the fact that you go to the store and you look and it says USDA inspected and says product of USA, but that's not true. It may or may not be true. And so we still work on agriculture issues like that, and get people out of agriculture to understand those issues, which is another really kind of unique thing about Northern Plains.
Yeah, it's so on the Wild Rockies Field Institute courses, we talked with numbers of ranchers and farmers, and those who are kind of on the, I guess you'd say, progressive, innovative, regenerative side,
right,
often feel pretty isolated in their communities. If they're out, they're kind of surrounded by
right,
people who are not at all on board with that.
Yeah.
So I can definitely imagine that having a strong organization that's advocating for that kind of work and supporting people doing it would be really.
Yeah, you can have a community of like-minded people, but it's not necessarily your neighbors,
Right. So you and your family have been, fighting coal mining in, particularly in the Bull Mountains, where you have summer pastures. And since we've been coming here as the Field Institute, that coal mine got built.
Yeah. And it, we've basically spent a lifetime trying to coexist with the coal mine. And early on, we realized that we weren't powerful enough to actually stop coal mining. So the next best thing was, well, can we coexist with the coal mining, and can we hold them accountable to do the reclamation to either not harm the water or replace the water? And back when it was beginning, that was kind of the deal that was made, is we'll have coal mining, but they're going to have to reclaim it, be responsible, and that coal mining and cattle could coexist. And that kind of went that way for a while. And then when it actually got down to when they really were damaging the water and having to do that expensive reclamation and stuff, that deal got challenged, and we could kind of stand up to them for a while, and it never was great, but there was some will from the federal government and some will from the state government to enforce those laws, and at least have a atmosphere where the ranches could coexist. And then in the last years, that's all changed. And so we could stand up to the coal companies, but when it got to having to fight the state and the federal government and the coal companies and really have no support in the courts, we couldn't do it anymore. The damage was real. So we basically were not we don't have the ranch in the Bull Mountains anymore, and there's it's not, we haven't given up the fight, that we're still there to try to but there's just no, we just have no power left there anymore to do any of those things. And that might change. But and then Northern Plains has been going through a big kind of changing our approach, I guess, because at some point we were never super powerful, but we did get laws changed and we did get things enforced, and then in the last, say, 5 years or so, we've lost what the power we had. Not completely, but so the way you explain it is there's, I think, three different kinds of power. There's the people who are in power, like the government and things like that, kind of intrinsic, and they have power. And then there's the power of money, basically, that the people with the most money have the most power, and that's where these companies are. And then environmental groups and stuff, they have some access to money, but never in the proportion that what the companies do.
Mm-hmm.
So the third thing is people power,
right?
And that's the only thing we really have access to it. But to have people power, you need to have a lot of people, enough to make a difference. And it doesn't matter how we always thought if we had the facts and if we had the best arguments, that we could win on the fact that we're right, that
right.
This is this. And then we've come to realize that really doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter how right you are, how much of the facts, if you don't have enough people to basically threaten, to come in and actually throw these guys out, you need a lot of people. And so that's what we've started organizing around, and we've had to give up a lot of our really things that we kind of pet projects. We have to look at things as like, is this going to build power? Is this, and so that's, we call it, we kind of call that our North Star, is like, if you're going to take on an issue, is this, no matter how right it is, no matter how much it's needed, if it's not an issue where you can start bringing in new people and building power, it doesn't matter how much it's needed.
Right.
And so that's kind of the focus we're trying to shift. And in order to do that, we've always had an issue we believed in, and then went out and tried to get people to come in and say, this is a really good issue, come in. And you get some people that way, but a lot of people who may be sympathetic, it's not the central focus of what's really important to them. It is right. Usually what's really important is just that day-to-day thing, as they, are they making a living? Are they getting health care? And so the approach has been go out and talk to people, find out what issues are really important to them, and then try to start building numbers around that to come in and actually get enough where you can get the local county commissioner elected, or get the, get the guy up in the legislature. And that's a very hard battle, and it's a lot of just really nitty-gritty organizing. But that's what we're working on, but it's also radical change from how we've done things before. And so, a lot of our task forces and local groups had a lot of staff support on kind of working on these issues, which was good, but it wasn't necessarily building power. So we've had to kind of shift our resources away from some of the things, really good issues that we worked on, but weren't really kind of working towards building power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that amount of change is challenging to people. I mean, to understand that. So that's the transition we're working through, but it's not easy. And so,
so what are some of the issues that you've had to sort of give up, and what are some of the issues or appeals that you're making going forward with? I assume this is all with Northern Plains Resource Council.
Yeah.
And
we're just into that transition, but like the Coal Task Force and the Bull Mountain Landowners Association, those are both kind of parts of Northern Plains. And so, like with Bull Mountains is, almost on all these things they do when they violate their permits and do all these things. We put a lot of resources in, like challenge it in court and going up and meeting with the Department of Environmental Quality, every month. And it just wasn't getting, we were just losing and didn't have any prospect for, winning, because, say back to, doesn't matter how right you are, or even if you got a good court case, if you got a bad judge. So we've kind of dropped a lot of those things. And then, we're kind of still deciding kind of what, issues to move into, but, there's the biggest of, affiliate is Yellowstone Valley Citizens Council in Billings.
Okay.
And they the original issue they worked on was, Billings was the third most polluted city in the country. I don't know if you ever knew that.
Really? No.
It was because of those 3 refineries.
Right.
And people were actually dying of sulfur dioxide. We had members that every once in a while there'd be a big release of carbon dioxide, and there were people actually dying of it.
Wow.
And the refinery's position was, if you make us clean it up, we're just going to leave town. We'll go somewhere else. And at some point, and we fought them and put in air monitoring things, and at some point they just totally changed their deal, and they cleaned it up. And now they take, they take great credit for it, which is fine. But anyway, that was how Yellowstone Citizens Council got going. But that, that's not really an issue anymore. So there's been lots of issues they've been working on, but they're don't draw in a lot of people. I mean, they're more kind of like planting trees and things like that, which are all good, but I mean, it's peripheral to people's lives.
Right.
So we've been doing these listening sessions where the members will go out and interview people and not try to convince them of anything, just find out, well, what issues are important to them. And, it's things like schools and healthcare and just all those things that are a real struggle in everybody's kind of day-to-day lives. And so, and then it's not kind of moving away from those environmental issues, but kind of expanding into like issues that aren't necessarily directly environmental.
Right.
And then, working to get people elected, and it's seems to be working, and they've been getting, a lot more people showing up at meetings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of a roundabout way,
right?
but
Yeah.
I think it has merits, and then it's people working together and getting to know each other and stuff, and then not giving up on those core values or core issues, but trying to expand it into a more holistic thing of what people kind of need in their lives to work better. So it's
I think it's really interesting that Montana kind of has this national appeal, and part of that appeal is like ranching culture and the natural environment that's vibrant and more intact than lots of places.
Yeah.
But it's also highly under threat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From lots of things, from development pressures, from climate change, and just like social change, which is inevitable. And it's just to think about like what do people really value about this place, and what are they willing to do to keep that, to sustain it, to enhance it, to keep it dynamic as things change.
Yeah, exactly. And that, a lot of these people that are showing up to these meetings are new to Billings, new to Montana, and really don't know the issues, don't know the background. I mean, they've come to Montana for a reason, but then they don't kind of know what the threats are. And so they are happy to talk to people on like, well, these are the things that are happening. And then, but then they also like, there's things they maybe see that they don't like so well. And so I think there's real potential there of getting those people to kind of share the basic values of Montana. And I think that's kind of the hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of potential there to do that.
I was talking with Alexis Bonagofsky, who does lots of environmental work with ranchers and World Wildlife Fund, and was just mentioning how in Missoula, where I live, at least, if you go to public meetings about most issues, you look around the room and most of the hair is white.
Yeah.
Right. They're big, and that's for good reason. Like, well, the people who have time and resources to be able to go to those places, but they're really hoping and looking for younger people who want to be involved too.
Yeah. And
or how that generational.
Yeah. And that's very much a part of this is, we've known that we need young people in, and you get a few, but it's still the issues we deal with. They're sympathetic to it, but it's not the central part of their lives. And it's just like my own kids. They're raising these young kids. I mean, they're just keeping their head over. They got jobs, they got kids. There isn't a lot of bandwidth for much of anything else. But the average, I think I am the average age of a Northern Plains member.
Really?
And we're just, unless we can bring young people in, the organization's just going to age out. And so that's where you got to go. You can't convince people to take on your issues. You got to figure out what their issues are and then build on that.
Yeah.
That's kind of the other idea behind this. And I think they are bringing in, yes. And, I've been to meetings and there's been some younger people there and stuff. So,
yeah. I also, you have your children are living like right nearby, and you have grandkids here. And I wonder what you anticipate for them as far as like the big issues that they'll have to deal with living in this place, and what your hopes are for, what this place will be for them, when they get to be your age.
Yeah, and that's very much on my mind. I guess that's the central goal that I have right now, is to some way make this place viable, that one or two of them could maybe to take it on and continue ranching. It might not look like ranching that this looks like or whatever. And then that usually it's not many, like out of a family, it's not many that really want to do it, because I mean, it's very particular, I guess, of what but pretty much like ranch family, they're all like the land. They all appreciate it. They would all like to see it continue. So if you could make it viable for one or two to actually ranch, but then have the opportunity for everybody else to either maybe live on the place and work in town, or maybe have one of those jobs where you don't really have to live in any particular place.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they move away, have a place to come back to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, that's kind of what I'm really working towards, and trying to get the grandkids enough familiar with cattle and horses and grass and all that to understand it and appreciate it, and then just to have a really nice place to grow up, which it is. It's man, they love it, and love being here, and they like Grandpa and doing stuff with him and stuff. So it's a challenge to kind of figure it out, but it's certainly worth it. And I think my kids have different points of view and from each other, but I think we do have in common that we'd like to keep the ranch, keep it as a place to live, and work towards making it viable, which it's probably not right now. It's not big enough, for one thing.
Right.
And but it's just starting to maybe, but we might be able to lease this place north of us, which would help. Just you need more land, and we're certainly not going to be able to buy it. But
right.
And in order to do that, then you have to meet the needs of the people that own the land, and their needs are very much different. And they want the recreational value, they want the hunting and things.
Oh,
so how do you, how can we enhance that for them and still be able to run, some cattle and things like that? And
right.
So that's what I was just up this morning on that place. It's divided it up into two. It's sold to two different people that want the recreational value and the hunting, and they didn't realize that. So I've leased some from one of them, but in looking around, I realized that when the ranch was divided, when they sold it, there wasn't fence between it. And I can't really turn my cattle in on a lot of it, because they'll just go out. Here's some bicyclists.
Cyclists have arrived.
Yeah. Are they looking for us?
I don't know where the front door is. All right. We're going to take a little break on our recording here. We'll be right back.
You made it. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Yes, you made it. It was
bike work, the new rack and everything?
Yeah.
Good.
How's David?
Good. It's been very busy. I've got lots of things going on.
Fair.
I was just interviewing him.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Fun.
Yeah.
Is this your first time being on a podcast?
No.
No,
I didn't think so.
Podcast.
He has pretty good media exposure.
Yeah.
He's been in the New
So
York
you know-
Times and
Whoa.
the Guardian. And
I can't wait to hear all about it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wild Rockies Podcast, a production of the Wild Rockies Field Institute, or WRFI for short. WRFI is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Missoula, Montana that offers academically rigorous field programs to students who want to study outside in the Rocky Mountain West. You can learn more about WRFI, the work we do, and join us out in the field at www.wrfi.net. That is www.wrfi.net. A special thank you to Martha Scanlon for letting us use a portion of her song, Seeds of the Pine, off the album The West is Burning, as the intro and outro of this show. Thank you to Dave Morris for conducting this interview, and to Steve Charter for not only participating in this episode, but for welcoming our students to his ranch year after year. From all of us here in Missoula, Montana, stay wild, and we'll see you next time.